Okay.
Welcome. And tonight you're going to see something totally different. I'm sure you've never even heard of the word Ophicleide. And we're going to talk about an instrument, the Ophicleide. And I brought one with me today. And we're going to hear what it sounds like and how it was used in the United States. Cut off the top. Well, the Ophicleide's name comes from two Greek words, ophe, meaning serpent, and kleida or kleida, meaning covered or stuffed. So it's basically a covered serpent. The serpent being this snake-looking instrument, and there were two versions of the serpent, the church serpent and the military serpent. But the Ophicleide was invented by Jean Hallery in 1817 and patented in 1821. Now for the first time, with the addition of keys on brass instruments covering all the tone holes, brass instruments could play chromatically. Ophicleides were generally 9 to 12 keys, and you had B flat and C versions for the bass Ophicleide. They were very popular in America in the 1820s and 30s, and even the U.S. Marine Band used Ophicleides in the U.S. Some were even made in this country. As an instrument used in marching, the serpent, the wood instrument with 6 holes, and the Ophicleide's predecessor, was very inconvenient to handle. In about the year 1800, the instrument was straightened to form an upright bass horn with 6 holes, which existed with the original form until both were replaced by the Ophicleide and then later valved instruments, as opposed to keys. For example, in Winchester, Massachusetts, a church choir supplemented its early years with instrumentalists, including traditional violin, double bass, cello, and occasionally a trombone, a serpent, and an Ophicleide. So the Ophicleide was used in church services in this country. And here is a woodcut from a circus band from 1832 out of Albany. And just to the left of that blue arrow, you can see the gentleman, and he is holding, my laser pointer is not picking up on the TV, he is holding an Ophicleide. And it says that this band consists of 14 members, and of course gives them great laurels. The band, opportunity to play as the menagerie enters the town, and they have purpose of carrying the band. They built an omnibus with 4 beautiful bay horses, and they, besides 2 elephants, male and female, that travel on foot, you've got the band playing, and the circus employs 50 men, and you've got 60 living animals, so it was quite a circus, literally. Now here is a handbill of the Boston Brass Band, one of the most famous bands of the 19th century in the United States, with the Paul Bunyan, as they used to call him, of the keyed bugle, Ned Kendall, and the keyed bugle was the soprano version of the Ophicleide. And I have a piece of sheet music here, Howard's Quickstep, and Eben Flagg is holding a keyed bugle. It's just like a regular bugle, but it has keys just like the Ophicleide. But that would have been the soprano voicing. But with the Boston Brass Band, we have a duet here with Edward Kendall and his brother on bugle and Ophicleide, When Thy Bosom Heaves a Sigh. Okay. And now here's a piece of sheet music performed by another famous band of Boston, the Boston Brigade Band from 1837. And in the middle, you can see an Ophicleide, the Ophicleide being right up there. Yes, we're using my thumb drive with her computer, so being a Mac, I think they're not exactly talking to each other perfectly. The Seward Band in Bloomington, Indiana started in 1838. Probably probably the first band organized in the town. It was given its name because 4 members are all from the Seward family. During the presidential campaign of William Harrison in 1840, he was only in office 31 days, the band was given the chance to perform. However, in place of a cornet, they had only a bugle, and playing the alto and tenor parts were an Ophicleide horn and a twisted concern called a serpent. You will see in textbooks and newspapers and such, the Ophicleide has all sorts of strange spellings. Sometimes you'll see Ophic, C-L-Y-D-E, like Bonnie and Clyde, or you'll see Ophicleide, all different ways. It was foreign even to the authors and editors. Now, here's from the Boston Post from 1840. Once again, the great Ned Kendall, very, very famous, used an Ophicleide in his quadrille band. A quadrille was a type of dance that was very popular in the 19th century. And the band is composed of violin, bugle, a post horn, a clarinet, harp, and an Ophicleide. And a lot of times with the quadrille band, especially the violinist would call out the different tunes and the different steps, or tell the couples to come up and do their dance routine. From the Baltimore Sun from 1840, again, the famed Boston Brigade Band playing a military concert, and you have a solo in part 2, a Swiss air, and it is on Ophicleide. So the Ophicleide, besides being a bass instrument, and being a bass Ophicleide, playing the bass line, was also featured occasionally as a solo. And here we have an ad from Henry Prentice in Boston, and here we have the spelling again, Ophicleides. Henry Prentice has all sorts of instruments, Ophicleides, bass and tenor trombones, French and German cornopians with 2 and 3 valves, bass horns, serpents, etc. And recently discovered, here is the actual street where Henry Prentice sold his instruments. This is from the Boston Public Library. This is a print that's in the library from an ambrotype from 1855. And you can see how on that street, which is Court Street in Boston, you have lots of things going on musically, photographers selling ambrotypes and such. So very interesting seeing a street scene from Boston, Massachusetts in the late 1850s. In 1844, in Boston again, Simon Nabel publishes brass quartet music for 2 bugles, trombone, and Ophicleide. So you're starting to have now chamber music being published, which included Ophicleide. And I have a reprint of the book with me over there, but this is the actual book, collection of instrumental music from 1844. And for example, the first 2 in the book is, and I can't even pronounce the name, Pipe Show's March by Mr. Nabel for 2 bugles, trombone, and Ophicleide. And I think we'll actually see that music right here. And now, from Homer, New York, close to Ithaca, here we have a handbill or broadside advertising a concert for Adams Brass Band. And you have 2 featured instruments. This is a fascinating broadside. You have the Andante in the first half for bass Ophicleide with theme and variations for the E-flat bugle, so it's actually a duet. And then on the second half, you have variations for the E-flat Ophicleide. There is no home like my own. The E-flat Ophicleide would have been smaller than this, and it would have been the alto voicing. George Warren of Weston, Massachusetts, paid $32 for an Ophicleide. A lot of money in 1842. played in the town band and the Unitarian Church. And Raphael Trier, leader of the U.S. Marine Band, bought him, and you see the spelling again, Ophicleide on June 13, 1849 for $30. And when the famed band leader, Julian, from Europe, went with his band on tour from Europe to the United States, he did add an American Ophicleide player, Mr. Freising, for the duration of the visit. Mr. Freising accompanied the most famous Ophicleide player in England, the great Samuel Hughes. And what I showed you previously, the lead voice in a band of Ophicleides was the keyed bugle. Looked just like a regular bugle, but with keys, like an Ophicleide, like a saxophone. And I brought the piece of sheet music with me, showing Evan Flagg with his keyed bugle on the cover. And now here is a 9-keyed import for the U.S. market. The body is copper and the keys are brass, once again made by our friend Henry Prentice of Court Street in Boston. The French generally made their Ophicleides entirely of brass, but copper was very popular in America, so probably Prentice specified that it be made of copper. And the father of brass and woodwind making in the United States, Samuel Graves, who in this time period was out of Winchester, New Hampshire, very close to Vermont, and the southwest corner of New Hampshire, also made Ophicleides, and here is a 12-keyed one. This one that I brought with me is 9-key. 12-key, you really have a lot of alternate fingerings. And that one is currently in the National Music Museum in Vermillion, South Dakota. Another of the giants of instrument makers, E.G. Wright, made an Ophicleide. Here's the remnants of one from the University of Central Missouri from the Essig collection. The book, Compositions of the Art of Music in America by the Music Industries of Boston, which I did bring with me today, mentions that the catalog of the exhibition by Chickering and Sons in 1902, and it states, still another kind of Ophicleide is the double bass, or monster in F or E flat. Now that was supposed to have been 8 feet tall, so it would have been way up. Made by E.G. Wright for Thomas Davis of Concord, New Hampshire. It has been lost track of, and that was in 1902, and in 2022, it's still lost track of. Boy, would I like to find that. And from the exhibition, here's an instrument that was listed as an Ophicleide. First Ophicleide made in America by Edward Torrens of New York, for a doctor the land of North Brookfield, Massachusetts, and used in the Boston Brass Band. He was a musician in 1835 in New York, and that's all that we know of him. Sadly, this instrument too is currently, we don't know what happened to it. If it still exists, if it's in somebody's attic or barn, if it's just been destroyed, would love to find that one. This gives me makes me very happy seeing this. From the Brattleboro, Vermont Eagle from 1850, we actually have an Ophicleide player, the bass player, being the leader of a cotillion band. A cotillion band was like a quadrille band used for dancing. And you would have 2 violinists, a cornet, an Ophicleide, and a prompter. So you just, you didn't have a very big band. And a lot of times in the day, a band is not a 100-piece band like we think of today. We see on Memorial Day or on the 4th of July, but it might be for dancing, and it might just be a quartet or a quintet. And the first part of Elias Howe's The Musician's Companion has some ensemble music for Ophicleides, of course the spelling again. And this was arranged for 2 bugles, post horn, cornopian, a type of cornet, 2 trombones, first and second Ophicleide. the two bottom lines. Now here's a very rare image. This is a daguerreotype, very, very early, most likely American, probably circa 1840, 1841, pretty much when the daguerreotype got going in this country, of a man holding on its bell an Ophicleide. And then what I find fascinating, besides the Ophicleide, you see that's a music pouch book. And I did bring an actual music pouch book, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. For marching and such, that was the way that you carried your parts around. And I brought a very rare book from 1853. How did you learn the instrument? If you didn't have somebody to be a tutor to you, help you out, you had a book called Dodworth's Brass Band School from 1853. And it taught people about music, how to read time signatures, key signatures, and it would have basically tutors for each instrument and fingerings for each instrument in the book. And here's the one for Ophicleide from the book, and I think I have it turned right to that page. And he also wrote an arrangement, Alan Dodworth, of You'll Remember Me with an Ophicleide part. But that's how you learned how to play back then. You would get a book, and you would basically at night, after you got done, whatever your job was, blacksmith, farmer, pharmacist, doctor, turn the candles on and get to work and practice your instrument. Another extremely rare, this is a little bit later, this is a full half-plate daguerreotype of musicians. You have cornopian player, 2-valve and 3-valve, 2 trombonists, a solo alto horn, a bass drummer, and an Ophicleide player up there. Very, very rare. Now, I did bring with me, this is an illustration that's quite famous called Slaying in New York. It's a portrayal of a band from the balcony up here performing at Barnum's Museum for Barnum and Bailey Circus. And one of these instruments appears to be an Ophicleide. You have an over-the-shoulder trombone where the slide is going to the front and the bell is going to the back, and then you have an Ophicleide. Dwight's Journal of Music from the mid-19th century mentions the Ophicleide. He said, read this. The bass Ophicleide, yes, Ophicleides are the altos and basses of the bugle. The bass Ophicleide offers great resources for maintaining the low part of masses of harmony, and it is also the most used. It is written on the F clef, bass clef, and its compass is 3 octaves in 1 note. The quality of these low sounds is rude, but it does wonder in certain cases beneath masses of brass instruments. The very high notes have a wild character, of which perhaps sufficient advantage has not yet been made. The medium, especially when the player is not very skillful, too much recalls the sound of the cathedral serpent and of a cornet à buckwig. I think it should rarely be allowed to be heard much displayed. There is nothing more coarse, I must almost say, more monstrous, or less fit to harmonize with the rest of the orchestra than those passages, more or less, written in the form of solos for the Ophicleide medium in some modern operas. It is as if a bull escaped from its stall. Boy, now, I wish he would say how he really felt about it.
Yeah, right. So, Mark, are you going to play this tonight?
Yes, I am.
Oh, man.
And hopefully I won't sound like the mad bull in the stall when I do it. Now, this is what I brought tonight. This is an actual music pouch from the 1860s, made out of leather, and it's embossed with a brass shield on it, and with various instruments. One of the instruments right there is an Ophicleide. And you would put that over your shoulder, and as you were marching, you would actually have your music in the bag, and if you needed to, you'd pull out whatever piece of music was needed, and you play. So very handy way, amazing considering that all sorts of conditions that these folks went through, that anything like that exists. And I have an actual image, a carte de vis, known as a CDV. This must have been a photographer that was very bored. He took an Ophicleide, put it on a chair, looks like in a field with some straw, and a child's chair, and he took a picture of it. And I have that with me over there. Why? I mean, it's a great still life, but somebody was bored. Now, here is Thomas Benjamin Clark. He was born November 23rd, 1819. And before going to North America, he was in the British Army. In Utah, Mr. Clark played Ophicleide and was a member of the brass band which performed at the Golden Spike ceremony in 1869 when the Transcontinental Railroad link was welded. He died in 1910 at the age of 90. And there he is, looking very proud with his Ophicleide. And he would have various Victorian trade cards of the era, and a lot of times they would use instruments as props, and I brought one with me today. This is from the last quarter of the 19th century, for a piano store in Boston, and the caricature is holding and playing an Ophicleide. Interesting choice. The following excerpt from an 1893 article by William Bailey in the Philadelphia Evening Star. He was an active bandsman, and he recalls the average band consisted of 15 pieces in the 1840s. 2 E-flat bugles, first and second French horns without valves, the post horn and the E-flat trumpet. We had the brilliant tone of the slide B-flat trombone and F bass trombone for bass, Ophicleide for brass, and the serpent, a wooden instrument with keys, cymbals, and snare drums. Now, I know people will take artistic liberties with paintings. Well, this artist definitely took artistic liberty. This is a painting by Ferris, he entitled Liberty's Pulpit. It includes a man holding an Ophicleide, and I have the reproduction of it over there. And what's fascinating is you have a gentleman holding a flag on Plymouth Rock saying 1620. You've got people looking at him. You've got somebody, looks like post-Revolutionary War, and then a fellow with an Ophicleide. Now, unless something that we don't know about, and the Ophicleide was invented in 1620, he took liberty in his creation of this painting. Another postcard from the Buster Brown series depicts a young Ophicleide player, and the puppy who's holding the music for the child who's playing the Ophicleide looks very happy. The next slide, we'll see several photos of the Augusta, Maine Cadet Band. This is really fascinating. This just recently turned up. This was taken between 1908 and 1912. An Ophicleide can be seen in the band photo, and as a bonus, there's also another photo of just the instrument at the local music store, which was owned by the store owner and band leader, Frank Dennis. Very rare and possibly unique to see a turn-of-the-century, 20th century instruments in a period band alongside an instrument like an Ophicleide. And here we have this Augusta Cadet Band. Right there is the Ophicleide. There is the Ophicleide itself. And there is the gentleman holding the Ophicleide in the upper right corner. And on the back of one of the prints, it just says at Dennis's Music Store for Augusta Cadet Band rehearsals. So did they use the Ophicleide just for rehearsals for fun? Did they actually use it out in the public for concerts? Who knows? This fellow does not look very happy with that picture. And one of my favorites, this is a picture of George Wolford playing his Ophicleide in 1917. When this was taken, Wolford might have been the oldest surviving Ophicleide player from the brass band era. He was a member of the Aurora Colony in Oregon. The Aurora Colony was this group of folks that moved to Aurora trying to sort of form their own Shangri-La colony out in Oregon. But there he is out sitting in front of the corn stalks with his Ophicleide. Stories you could tell, I'm sure. Even the modern C.G. Kahn Band Instrument Company issued a poster depicting the famed Allentown, Pennsylvania band from 1852. You've got the leader there with his wife holding a key bugle. Behind him, two fellows holding over-the-shoulder sax horns. And in the gazebo, an Ophicleide player. What does an Ophicleide sound like? Well, I'm going to play a CD of an incredible modern Ophicleide player, and let me know what you think. I will not sound as good as him, trust me. So this gives you an idea at the highest level of just how incredible an Ophicleide can sound. And I must say, Patrick actually makes his living playing antique instruments like that, and he's just a tour de force.
Is that entire CD of Ophicleide?
Yes. You can believe that. The Virtuoso Ophicleide. Yeah.
It seems like there's not many note capabilities by looking at that.
But there is, you can play everything and anything. To play it like that, though, is really something.
That's amazing.
I should mention that if you're in the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, and I haven't been down there in a bit, but as you go in the front door, past the lobby, if to the left, you go downstairs, and right in front is a typical 19th century scene, basically of James Shepherd's music store. And one of the things they have hanging on the wall is an Ophicleide.
Oh
And
my
that
gosh.
Ophicleide was used in a group called the Buffalo Philharmonic Social Orchestra. Not related at all to the Buffalo Philharmonic, but it was a dance group, the Buffalo Philharmonic Social Orchestra.
I think it's changed. I've been down there recently and it wasn't there.
Really?
They've changed.
I know that they've done a whole bunch of changes, and I know that they misplaced a couple instruments. I'm hoping that they,
Oh,
yeah.
very good.
Thank you.
I can't believe I've never actually noticed those in any antique pictures I've had.
Oh yeah, there's,
It's amazing.
well, I brought with me my antique Ophicleide. It's 9 keys, made by Bichard, and this is the original box that it came in. And what's fascinating is the gentleman's name is stenciled on it,
Oh.
Al Barrett. And I have researched and researched and researched, and the best that I can come up with is Mr. Barrett. And he apparently used Ophicleide. He was an actor, and he used it in his performances. And from Masonic history, Lawrence Barrett passes away in 1891. He was an American stage actor. He was born in 1838 in Paterson, New Jersey, as Lawrence Brannigan. He was raised in Detroit. That's where he had his first stage work at the age of 15, appearing as a French spy. 3 years later, he made his first appearance on a New York City stage at the age of 18, portraying Sir Thomas Clifford in The Hunchback. In 1858, Barrett moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where he appeared with a repertory company at the Boston Museum. And during the Civil War, he did join the 28th Massachusetts Infantry. He never saw any action. In 1867, Barrett traveled to London for his first appearance on a London stage. He returned in 1882, 83, and 84. And after returning to the States, he moved west and managed the California Theater in San Francisco, California. Barrett frequently worked with Edwin Booth, brother of John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. Booth and Barrett became very close in the 1880s, and Barrett actually wrote a sketch of Booth entitled Edwin Booth and His Contemporaries. And Barrett contacted Booth and suggested that they tour together. And it was during these tours that you will see some notices in newspapers talking about how the gentlemen were holding Ophicleides and such. So did they play them? Did they just use them for certain props? Was it part of some play or musical? I didn't include it in the presentation because I'm still researching it. So that they were on stage for quite a few years. And in 1890, Barrett began to develop health problems, and he passed away in 1891, buried in Massachusetts. And a few years after his death, an author who visited his grave stated, "The neglect which Barrett's memory has been treated is one of the most shameful blots upon the theatrical profession." And Barrett was the grandfather of stage actress Edith Barrett, who was the first wife of actor Vincent Price.
Oh my gosh.
So, a whole lot of everything.
Wow.
So, now,
Here we go.
How much does it weigh?
oh, this,
Yes, it has.
88 pounds,
That's it?
very light, very, very light.
Is it hard to play?
Pardon?
Is it hard to play?
Yes. If you're used to having valves, and all of a sudden you have to have keys, it's very, very unusual. So it gives you an idea that you can move fast, but sometimes the fingers just don't go where you want them to.
You
So-
did a fine job with it. Holy mackerel.
And what's so cute about this, here is a little piece, like almost looks like a pin, and this is where you would have put your music if you were taking your music out of your music pouch and
Oh, you would
playing.
slide right in there, yeah.
Right in there. And this old girl has seen many a day. And with that, I open it up to any questions.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I mean, it's definitely an unusual instrument. And just like a brass instrument, I mean, you can play any. So, I mean, you can play a full scale on this. It's not as refined as today's instruments unless you're a virtuoso like Patrick, but it's still, you're able to get around the instrument. And in the orchestral world, one of the most famous uses of the Ophicleide in the old days, something from Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique, the fifth movement, his Dies Irae, which became very famous in the Jack Nicholson horror movie, The Shining. And you would have the Ophicleide playing the Dies Irae. So, if that doesn't bring conjures of bad things happening, I don't know what will. So, any
It appears like it was very popular years ago.
very, very popular.
So why did it go out of vogue?
It was hard to play, and the valved instruments were so much easier to play. And this, you really had to be very fluid. And and that's the same with the key bugle. Very beautiful sounds, but the valves made it so much easier to play. And that's why it went out of vogue.
The CD sounded very similar to a French horn.
Yes, a French horn or a euphonium almost.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that.
I mean,
You can play
patent
the
is probably
trumpet,
a
right?
reproduction instrument. So that's one of the reasons. The reproductions tend to be a little more refined and don't have nearly 200 years of,
Oh, like one of his had been made.
yes. Oh, his was probably made like 5 years ago.
Oh.
So, I mean, and in fact, China is importing them now. If somebody had told me 20 years ago you could buy a Chinese Ophicleide, I would have just said, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
But they're still calling him Ophicleide?
Yep, absolutely. And they exist. So if you'd like to, take a look at anything up
Yeah.
here. I have all sorts of things to look at. And thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Something completely different, as they used to
Yes.
say with Monty Python.